Good day, listeners, and welcome to the Beyond the Checkbox podcast, where we talk to frontline leaders in mental health to help improve our own mental health and those of our organizations. Today, I welcome Zeke Smith. He's the director of training at Apache Industrial in Houston. But of course, they have folks all across North America, and they're awesome partners. They put mental health first in their organization. They take the concept of wellness and total human health, and we put employees first very seriously. That's why they've been such great partners. And Zeke, along with his team, have been really talking about this and getting the conversation going. So that's why I love talking to Zeke every time we connect. I've been fortunate enough to connect with him for the last couple of years and do some talks with him publicly. And we want to get him on the podcast as much as possible. Especially before World Mental Health Day. That's on October 10th. That's coming up soon. And we want to be able to sing this message from on high and make sure that people know that we can talk about mental health, we can destigmatize mental health, and we can actually put in training to help people through difficult times and also prevent adversities in their life. Enjoy the show. You'll see, I enjoy talking to Zeke every time I text him or call him or any interaction that I have with him. I get pretty fired up talking to Zeke Smith about this topic. He adds a lot of energy and clarity to it and where we're at in the world of mental health. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. You are listening to Beyond the Checkbox, a podcast that focuses on leading strategies around bringing more mental well-being into the workplace. My name is Ryan Todd. I'm a psychiatrist and the CEO of Adversity. I'm sitting down with industry-leading change makers to break down their process and see how they are going above and beyond for their workforce mental well-being. You were doing a bit of a tour, well, at least last time we connected. Was it Indiana? Like you were doing some rural USA type of mental health advocacy. Have you been traveling and doing that stuff yet?
No. So that was from a conference that I spoke at. An HR manager that was in the audience asked me to come talk to her foreman in Sioux City, Iowa. So it was a bit of a planes, trains, and automobiles to get there. But yeah, it was awesome. I got to go twice. They split their foremen from all across the country into two big meetings for 2 separate weeks, and I got to go up and I guess I fit in one of the mornings. They wanted to talk about their benefits and they wanted to really discuss total human health and mental health specifically. So
nice.
It was fun.
How was the message received? Like you have a story because of, your dad in construction and mental health and stigma around it. You've worked in the industry. How is it received? Like, is it positive? Is there still the stigma around it? What do you feel the reception is?
It was mixed, I think. There were some of the guys in the room, and by the way, completely 100% male audience, some diversity, but for the most part, white male audience of electrical foremen. So it was mixed. Some guys you saw nodding the heads, had a few tears when I told the story of, my dad and all the different experiences there. And there's a few folks, surprisingly, that kind of spoke up at the end in the back of the room. That whole, church member, the common church member that speaks up, that has some influence. It wasn't, didn't have a fancy title. It was pretty cool. They talked about, some things they've done, breathing techniques and different things to help when they're stressed. It was great. So overall, yeah, I thought it was well received. The HR leadership wrote me afterwards and said that they thought it went really well, and the guys got a lot of good nuggets out of it and seemed to help. So they were happy, I think, that the company invested to some extent in discussing the topics. I think that's a good first step.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to tell. Like I've been in rooms where it's, there's 200 people and everyone's all jacked up about health and mental health and there's tons of receptivity. And then there's, you go to rooms with 50 people and they cannot wait to get out of there. And they're sort of voluntold to be in the room. And those are it's so, sometimes I feel like you can actually feel or visualize a pushing mechanism. Like I feel like I'm pushing the message and I'm like raising my voice and trying to push it. And they're just like sitting there, arms crossed. Those are the toughest talks to give about this topic, because if it's the audience is not receptive, man, that sucks. I feel bad for musicians who, like all musicians, even the top musicians in the world, feel like, I'm sure they feel that on certain performances. I definitely feel that when I'm talking about this topic. Maybe you don't get that. Maybe you're just like, maybe you always hit.
No. I just like any good stand-up comic, you got to flop a few times, right? So, no, there's a couple of guys even some guys that spoke up, like almost heckling a little bit, like, what are you going to do about it? You know, just that some of the things I was talking about were theoretical, even like, how the hell do you do that? And things like that. So it was interesting, but I love that. I love at least they're engaged to some extent, even if it's to be a contrarian, at least it spurs conversation, not just up there with a slide deck and talking. There's some emotion behind it, which that's great. I love the old, oh, you don't believe me? Hold my beer and let's talk about it. You know, let's prove it to you that this is a real thing. So that kind of gets my gears turning a little bit. So I like that.
I had one guy who didn't stand up. He put his hand up and said, "So you're gonna cure mental illness now?" But just, you know, it's
I already have, sir. I already have. That's what I'm here.
It's kind of an interesting question, though. Like, the question really is, to what extent can what you're telling me change a certain element of human nature? Or, you know, like there is an argument to be made that there's a group, a population that will always struggle with mental health issues. Maybe that's 5%, who knows? Just like 5% of us will struggle with, you know, arthritis, right? And 95% won't. So it was an interesting question, but I think he was asking it he was trying to be, I don't know if he was trying to reinforce the stigma around it, but like it's kind of like what the hell do you want me to do about it sort of question. Right. So I do get that sometimes. Do you ever get that sort of response?
Yeah, you still have folks that are, that's not my problem. Yeah. We don't really talk about here. That's essentially what he's telling you. Like, you can't do anything about that. That's somebody else's problem. And I think the answer is no, we're not going to cure anything, but we're going to, you know, just like you weren't, in years past, you weren't really able to go in and have a conversation about your performance with your manager. You just got told, hey, you're doing a good job or a bad job. Here's your raise, or you didn't get one, or you're fired. Now there's these performance conversations throughout the year, managerial cadence, where you may meet with your team every week or every month, or, you know, at some regular cadence. Now that's a regular thing. It didn't used to be. So all we're saying is we're going to make this a part of the conversation now. It's a topic that we're going to discuss. It's not purely personal, and that's okay. I think keeping it simple for some of the folks is great. Let's not get too clinical about it. Let's just start saying, hey, when you're having issues, let's talk about it. I think language matters in this context. And if you get too clinical, you will lose people, because then it sounds like you're trying to treat or cure. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to address and discuss, really.
And it takes at least time to start. Yeah, sure. It takes.
That's the key. That's the key. Is like these things can become new, you know, the social media circus. These things can be the new hot topic and then fade out, right? And you have to be persistent and say, no, this is not just, you know, World Mental Health Day or Suicide Prevention Month, September, or Mental Health May. This is part of our culture. This is part of our health and safety policy and program, and it's part of us. This is what we do here.
What do you think it's a trend? Like I was sort of worried that after COVID, there would be okay, we're good now, right? Like, and the thing I was worried about is the reality is that we're not good now, and mental health outcomes in some demographics, some areas have gotten better, some it's gotten worse. Like, do you think it's a trend? Like, and we have to push the message through that trend, or do you think, like, I don't know, mental health is here to stay, or like, what's your take on that? Is it trendy?
Well, I don't think so, of course, right? I tend to think, and I think we've talked about this before, Ryan, whether offline or on one of the episodes, but I think the more data that comes out from years during pandemic and right thereafter, we're going to see that this was worse than we even thought, right? I think during the crisis, a lot of folks just hunkered down, bared down, said, hey, we're going to stick together. We're going to work through this, just like humans typically do in crisis, hurricanes or natural disasters. They kind of hunker down and get together and work to help their neighbor. And I think there was a lot of that during the pandemic. And now on the outside of it, as we come out, is some of the, hate to say PTSD, but some of the trauma that was experienced during that time. We're going to start to see that kind of come to life a bit. So I don't think it's trendy. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's why we need to be talking about it now, because I truly think, Ryan, that as these studies come out, that things are going to be really, really eye-opening to some folks, whether it's suicides, heaven forbid, or just mental health treatment, anxiety in children, marriage issues, work, absenteeism. I just think these things are all going to trend up before they get better, unless we kind of get ahead of it and just make this a part of the work culture, company's culture, to talk about it and get through it together.
I tend to agree. And I think there's a lot of data to back that up. Somebody texted me this Joe Rogan clip. I don't know who the guest was, but they were talking about that there was these clips back in the 80s and like early 90s when seatbelt laws were coming into play. And this one person was like, we can't drink when we drive. We have to put our seatbelt on. We're living in a communist country. It was amazing. Yeah. And then I did a little speaking on this topic this week and last week. And I did talk about seatbelt laws because one of our researchers sat me down and told me about the death rates of motor vehicle accidents in the 1913 compared to today. So in 1913, if for every 10,000 motor vehicle owners, 33 of those people would die of a motor vehicle accident. So you have a town of 10,000 people. If everyone owned a car and drove at a certain frequency, it was like 33.6 of them would die of a motor vehicle accident. Okay, that's wild. So super dangerous, technological revolution, all the laws and everything came through mid 80s, like 50 years after the seatbelt was invented, came into play. Right. And then there was legislation behind it, and there was an uproar. You can't make me do it. And all that in 84, I think it was 49 states or something adopted that seatbelt. Okay. So fast forward to 2021, it's now 1.5 per 10,000 vehicle owners. So a 95% improvement, but that took 100 years of driving. And so I also, that sort of gave me some comfort, because I'm always pushing this message, and when are we going to make things better? And it gave me a little bit of things take time, to push the stigma aside, to get really to where the action is, to make this an ongoing, comfortable topic for people. It's going to take time, and it, maybe it does take another 50 years to reduce those rates by 95%.
I agree. I think this is a long fight. I think because the social media, again, the cycle changes so much. Some of this has to just be Ryan and Zeke talking about it a lot, right? And going and talking to folks at work. And then again, someone in the back of the church standing up and saying, by the way, I'm going through this too. Not just the preacher preaching the message all the time, right? Some influential person in the company or within a family that may not hold a title at the company or within the family, but says, I'm going through this, or I had a family member go through this. It's real. That's what it's going to take, is creating or facilitating environments within companies where folks like that feel comfortable enough to open up and share, right? I am very fortunate to work for a CEO that is very comfortable in his own skin and shared a lot of his experiences with mental health issues in his family, and suicide in his family, or suicide attempts in his family. So it's driven from the top with us, which is great. But we also have some of these leaders that are embedded in the business that have started to speak up and say, yeah, I'm going through this, or my son's having issues here, or my wife is here, So it's becoming slowly, we're not all out here, airing our personal laundry all the time. But when folks are struggling or having some issues personally with their families or whatnot, those stories are bubbling up more frequently than they ever have in the history of the company, and certainly more than I've seen. And, for a knuckle dragging contractor construction company, it's pretty heartwarming and pretty promising for me as one of the folks here trying to advocate and evangelize that this is a real thing and we should talk about it more. So
it's cool to hear that there's more conversation. I was in Denver Wednesday. It's Friday right now when we're having this conversation. So Wednesday, and then I was doing a talk with a construction company about mental health, and somebody said, how do you think about the performance and evaluation issue? And I've been waiting for your opinion on this. So he said a lot of folks, especially in the front lines, like, fine, if you're the CEO, it's okay to speak up. You're relatively protected, and that's okay. If you're the contractor who's in and out of a job, needs to save money, is also struggling, they are less likely to speak up because they might get poorly evaluated for the next job, or they might get judged by their peers, pushed out. That there's a lack of safety there. That really struck me. Like, how do we get on top of that? How do we change that culture? Because it's okay for us who work in offices or administrators of these large workforces to do it. It's definitely another thing to try and not punish and create that psychological safety. I don't know. How are you thinking about that now?
Well, twofold, I think. First of all, you and I have talked with this. Another topic, again, is using safety, especially in our industry, construction. Safety is the red thread. It's paramount. It's, if you go to any construction company across the country or across North America for that matter, they're going to say safety is number one, right? Keeping our people safe, getting them home to their families, that is non-negotiable. And so I always laugh and think, I don't know how many years ago this happened, but 5 or 10 years ago, this new concept called stretch and flex came out, right? So every morning, these same field workers, for us, we got carpenters, scaffold builders, industrial painters. I mean, the toughest of the tough kind of guys. They work in some of the most potentially dangerous environments on earth, are out there doing Jane Fonda style, moving their arms, stretching, touching their toes, because data came out that doing that before you work reduces injury, right? So it makes you safer. Stretch it out a little bit and flex. And it was goofy and you got made fun of. And, the safety managers were given a lot of guff about it, but now it's a part of what we do here, a part of what construction workers do every morning, or they should be. It's, regulated by OSHA. So there's things like that they were goofy and silly, but they mattered. And we stayed with it, to our earlier point, and said, no, this is what we're going to do. And I think the same thing. So, it's talking about it in the context of safety. You don't have to be a clinician or be a Dr. Ryan Todd to talk to construction guys and say, hey, stressed workers, distracted workers, burnt out workers, tired workers on a 400-foot scaffold are inherently less safe workers. Oh, and by the way, the scaffold, or working at heights, is the most dangerous thing they do. 26%, I think, of all injuries happen from falling, right? We've talked about the fatal 4, the focus 4. Fall from is one of them, of course. It's the leading one. So we build scaffold, and scaffold happens just so happens to be one of the most dangerous things that folks do, work at heights. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to make them more safe? Yes. We teach them how to put on a harness, how to clip in while they're at heights, right? How to move around, clip in, clip out. We teach them how to deal with that. It's almost like human nature for them. They can close their eyes and, be in a completely black room and know how to clip in, clip out at this point. So why not train them how to deal with personal crisis or stress or distraction or whatever's happening, so that they can focus on their job which is, again, inherently very dangerous. I think that we have to hone in on the safety component of this, because that's what it is. There's all, you know this, man, there's all this data that says physical health and mental health are connected. Dr. John Deloney's talking about, if you want to change your anxiety levels, work out every day, do something active. It's connected. And so the other way around, if you're distracted and your mind's not there, some of the work, and I'm not just saying for us, some of the work these guys do is extremely dangerous, extremely detailed. And it's not just you getting hurt, right? You could potentially hurt 10 or hundreds of other folks with your error. And so I just think talking about this, saying, hey, we don't have to talk about mental health in the context of going to see a shrink, but we do have to talk about it in the context of stress and burnout and distraction, and you're worried or anxious, which, I think the number one disability on earth is anxiety and depression. It's like, that's incredible. That's the reason people miss work. These folks need to work. They need to make money. If they're anxious and depressed or stressed and distracted, they're not coming to work and they're not making a paycheck. They're not supporting their families. So it all works together. Again, language matters, and you have to talk in the context that these folks can relate to and understand. And and you stick with it, and you make it a part of your business and make it a part of your culture, and you don't give up, and don't let it be trendy and say, oh, did it for May. Yay. We talked, our toolbox talk on Monday in September was about suicide prevention. Go get them. All right. Don't commit suicide and talk to somebody, call a doctor, call a psychologist. No, man, like, we're going to talk about how to do breathing, how to get better sleep, how stretch and flex actually helps your mental health. I mean, all those things. It has to be a part of the language. You have to relate to what they're doing, and then it becomes commonplace. And that will, I hope, prevent some of that getting a little bit pushed away and excommunicated from the crew. And by the way, this too, these guys work in crews, right? So they're a little family. Our saying that we use with Headversity is family, crew, and you, because their crews are their crews, and they go from job to job and sometimes company to company as a crew. Rarely do these folks go individually around. They stay with their crew. The foreman's got 5 or 6 or 7 helpers and craftsmen with them, and that's how they roll. And so we start there, right? We start in that crew and make sure they're safe there to talk. And then the rest starts to work itself out and starts to filter out.
Love that, family, crew, and you. So you said there was a stage with the stretch and flex where it was kind of goofy, right? Is that where we're at right now with mental health? Do you think, are we beyond that? Are we before that, the goofy stage, the like, hey, you're getting chirped if you talk about it, or like, oh, this again, or eyes rolling? Is that where we are? You could probably speak to construction most fluidly. I don't think that's where we're at in like maybe more white collar organizations. I think we're a bit beyond the goofy stage. Where do you think it is with construction?
I think we're beyond that. I don't think people think it's goofy, or our employees think it's goofy anymore. You're coming to that storming phase, right? The storming, norming, performing. You're probably at storming, where you got some folks that are all in and say, I love that we're talking about this. And you still got some detractors who are like, yeah, that's cool that your guys are doing that, but I'm going to go over here and just do my job and go home. So we're mixed. I don't think I have not experienced that. So again, asking for my opinion, I have not experienced folks saying that's really goofy and something we shouldn't talk about. I have had conversations with folks that say perhaps we're overdoing it, right? Talking about it too much, giving folks an out to say, oh, I need a mental health day, sort of taking advantage of the newfound awareness of the topic and the issue. And I think that's fair. There's got to be balance, right? We want to focus on the airplane analogy. Put your oxygen mask on first before you take care of the other people, your children, the minors with you. Same thing. We're not preaching, put your oxygen mask on and breathe heavy and don't worry about anybody else around you. Only focus on yourself. We're not preaching that message. Yeah. We're saying you need to take care of yourself in order to be able to do what your life's purpose is. Take care of others, take care of your family, be productive at work, or whatever you're meant to do on this earth. Inspire others, however that is. It's not, don't worry about anybody else, take care of you, boo, and go. It's take care of you first so that you can, in fact, serve others, or whatever that mission is for your life.
There was this, I also wanted your opinion on this. There was and it's slightly political, so it'll make it fun. there was this study. It was a venture, a VC, a visual capitalist thing. I don't know if you get those emails. They're awesome. They kind of helps you understand the world. And then they were referencing a study that it was showing where people are most comfortable in reaching out for help and had the best access to mental health care. Okay. So the states that were most comfortable in reaching out for help were tended to be blue states. Okay. The states where there was more mental health stigma, and as a result, they were arguing less resource around it, tended to be red states. Now, I kind of read that as the Republican kind of ethos is more independence, right? And maybe more toughness and grit. And on the Democrat or kind of the blue side, if you could even make such a generalization, it's less about that. It's more like it's a more liberal culture. So whatever comes up that's trendy, you can talk about it more openly. Did you have any read of that? I thought that was super interesting. What is it about that feeds into stigma? I think we could put on the table that there's probably more mental health stigma in West Virginia than there is in Oregon, right? I could probably put that on the table, and there's probably data to back that up. But what do you think that is? What's going on there? What's the complex that we can start to pull apart?
That's a good point.
And maybe it's not political. Maybe it's regional. Maybe it's a whole host of other things. Maybe it's not identity. That's personal. But what do you make of that?
Yeah, well, it could be political to some extent. I mean, political beliefs, right, and how you vote. But listen, those red and blue states have changed over the years, right? Oh, yeah. So I'd say there's demographics there, right? So you said West Virginia. So a rural community may not have access to, Beyond the Checkbox podcast. They don't know that it exists. They haven't heard about it, right? I mean, they're not talking about it. Maybe they are in a different context. And there are some great people, but yeah, there's some rugged individualism in those rural communities that you work hard, you come home, you struggle, and life is a struggle, and they're grateful for it. And they're not looking for some of that other support or information. Whereas you get into larger cities and the more urban environments, and you've got access to the world at your fingertips, literally in a phone. And so, and by the way, politically, whether it's Democrat or Republican, in a more liberal culture, you do depend on there's a joke, right? The Democrats want bigger governments. They want the people that vote there want the government to take care of them. And on the Republican side, one of the arguments is they want smaller government. They want to take care of themselves.
More autonomy, more independence. Yeah.
Correct. So there's some of that probably, right? It doesn't mean they're not talking about it. And by the way, a lot of these healthcare providers, I'd say Texas is a red state, but the urban environment, Houston is a blue city, a blue county, right? I mean, Texas for the longest time was blue, different kind of blue than today, but it was. So that, my grandfather was a young man in the Union in Ohio. I mean, hard charging Democrat, right? Manufacturing worker. Moved to Alabama, still heavy union, manufacturing worker. And then as he got older, he saw the political landscape change, and he ended up, before he died, he was pretty far to the right. It just changed. So I think rather than the political part, maybe geopolitically, we should say is the right term. It's just, I think where folks are, right? Access and conversations. Because by the way, Texas is rapidly changing. I mean, that Houston and Calgary being very similar cities, very heavy industry, but, really positive economic climate. So a lot of businesses coming here, and that could be something too, right? The kind of concentration of businesses and companies focusing on this, right? Sure. There may not be coal mining companies in West Virginia focused on mental health, right? But they're technology companies or oil and gas companies, the Exxons, the world that are in Houston and Calgary, they are, and they're pushing it. And that, by the way, leads contractors that work for those companies to do the same thing, because when they focus on something, they want people that they do business with to be focused on similar items especially for their people. They want talented folks working for them. So I think that's probably what it is. It's just the geopolitical landscape, but that's interesting. I hadn't seen that, so I'd like to look at it more. There's the libertarians there in the middle, conservative, but also socially kind of liberal. So let's see where they fall.
Yeah, Corgi, can you look that up? I might be. I might be just spouting off here, but yeah,
No.
it was a red blue thing. Also, I think the best point there was the rural urban split. Like there is undoubtedly it's something I talk about as well is you can reduce stigma all you want. If you don't give access, people are still not going to talk about it. And there's some really famous medical anthropology work done in sub-Saharan Africa where they would go to towns and villages and even cities where there was HIV/AIDS. We're talking 90s and with the epidemic around that in sub-Saharan Africa. And you could give people knowledge and education about HIV/AIDS. You could even give them a diagnosis, but without any actual treatment, it was even more stigmatizing. Hey, you have a diagnosis of HIV. And then they're like, okay, where do we go and get help? But they're like, it doesn't exist yet. It's actually, it's really bad. And that entrenches stigma. So I'm thinking in these rural settings, I could speak for this, growing up in a very rural setting, if you don't have access to that thing that you can get help with, stigma is just more deeply entrenched. Because what's the point of talking about it if we can't actually get help for that thing? If we can't access publicly available resources or crisis lines or even, teletherapy, let alone psychologists and psychiatry work.
No doubt. And this is where I think companies can make the difference. Because as you know, you guys have started a great company and seem to have a great culture, and people really care about the name on the front of the jersey over the name in the back. And Apache has a very prideful culture as well. So companies, if they drive that access and that message, people buy in because they may not do it at home. They're like, man, I really love my company and they care about me, right? They want me to bring my human self, my whole human self to work and give it all. Give them my all. Well, they're trying to give back, right? They're giving me something back, not just go work 10 hours, 12 hours, 13 days straight and 1 day off. They're giving you more than that, right? They're trying to put their arms around you. I think companies can really make a difference because folks tend to, tribalize. You know this from your research, like you tribalize around your company. You just feel this. Yeah. A lot of folks do it, whether it's tech, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's, construction, you feel some pride, some family, community pride around your company. And so if companies make this topic, this mental health awareness and not treatment, but discussion and connecting you to resources. And here's the biggest thing, Ryan, that you and I talk about, training you on how to deal with this crisis, not just saying, go call the benefit provider or go see your local psychologist or psychiatrist. We're going to help you. We're going to train you to deal with the crisis. That is going to make the biggest impact. I have no doubt in my mind, because I think I've said this to a few folks in construction specifically, and certainly in oil and gas. We train these folks how to deal with every single crisis that would happen on their job site, okay, including driving to work, by the way. So not just on job site. We train them how to drive better, more carefully. We train them when one horn goes off, where to go, what to do, who to grab, who to text, who to check in with, what things to grab. I mean, it is ingrained in these folks, but we're not going to train them on how to deal with their personal crisis. Does that make a whole lot of sense? Not to me, right? So just if we're we've already proven how capable we are to train these folks repeatedly and over. So it's almost like common knowledge on where to go and what to do in a crisis on a site or a refinery or a petrochem plant or a manufacturing site. Why can't we add this to it and say, hey, we're actually going to train you on how to deal with your crisis as best we can? I know we can't help everybody, but we're going to connect you to resources who can better train you than we could, just like we do now. If we can't train you on a certain certification, we send you off somewhere to a safety council, to a specialist, or to a class to get that certification. What's the difference? It's the same thing. We should make it the same thing, not this thing over here. And I think that will make the biggest impact, man. I have no doubt. And I'm excited for it.
I love that. I love that. Because I've spoken about something similar. Like, it's incredible how much training we do on the job, right? And most of that is, the buttress of that is how our mental health is, and we still don't train that. I think that's going to be the next thing. Like, I mean, we push that hard here at Adversity and all the organizations that we work with, but I think we're going to look back at that, 50 in 100 years, we're going to say, hey, they would train like accounting skills at that accounting firm, and they wouldn't train mental health skills. Like, what was that about? Remember that day? And then the conversation that we're having will be the one that the Joe Rogans of the future laugh about. They're like, oh, look at these two old guys joking around about mental health training. And now it's just a normal thing. I think that's how this should go, how it needs to go. I think it will go that. And I think it takes, these conversations to get it there.
It does. It takes some grit. It takes some persistence. It takes I said it earlier, the hold my beer mentality, and I'll show you. And it is important. I mean, again, the fatal four, the four things in construction that lead to injury incident, we train our folks till we're blue in the face on those topics, right? Fall from, struck by, caught in between, electrocution. We are all over them about those things. But yet suicide and mental health outnumber all four of those, and we're not going to train you on that. That just seems a little bit silly. To our little old conversation about downstream, upstream, that's treating it like downstream when everything else we train you on is upstream and our issue. So, I mean, and look, we joke here sometimes. Look, I'm the director of training. So some training in the past happens when something happens, right?
Yep.
Somebody trips in the hallway. You do a slip and trip training on how not to trip in the hallway. That's how training came from, usually comes from. It's never or rarely is it proactive. Well, okay, we have data now to say there's things happening. People are struggling. And to be candid, people are dying in our industry unnecessarily. So we should start training. I mean, we train you on how not to fall and what to do. And we train your crew, your team on how to protect each other and to keep a lookout for each other. And we train our apprentices here on how to communicate the whole time, even on the most simple task. These things they translate perfectly to this mental health topic, to the stress, the burnout, the distraction. They translate perfectly. Just keep talking. If we talk, if we communicate, if we have dialogue, it will become the red thread. It will become the norm to normalize, destigmatize, normalize. It just will. It'll just be what we do here.
Love it. Zeke, I know you're a busy guy, so I won't keep you too much longer. I always get fired up after I talk to you because I'm like, yeah, we have more soldiers in the field fighting the battle. So it's awesome. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time today. And of course, it's Canadian Thanksgiving this weekend. Of course, you're up on that sort of thing. So Happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Next week is October 10th. It's World Mental Health Day. World Mental Health Day, October 10th.
Yes.
And so we're going to be doing a number of things and hopefully posting this podcast for that so we can, sing this message loudly across all of our channels, and we'll get it across to you so you can get it across to your channels in your fancy podcast way. We're not as fancy here, okay, as your podcast. We're just
you got to be kidding.
We're just
look at that thing.
We're just a meat and potatoes. You're just your average in our kitchen setting podcast.
Well, then we'll get you up to the big leagues soon, buddy. We'll get you on the show. No big deal.
Okay. Next time I'm down
there. Get you on the show.
Okay, buddy. Thanks for chatting. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, everything you do. We'll talk soon.
Same to you, man. Yes, sir. Thanks.